You are listening to Perplexity.
Australia has no shortage of weird animals that seem too weird to exist. And the native tribes here have a very rich culture with a lot of stories about them. These include legends of frightening monsters and powerful spirits. Some people have scoffed at these stories or maybe found them entertaining but not really taken them seriously. Other people have seen them as cautionary tales or even fully bought into them. Some in this area have passed these stories of Australian creatures on to their children for decades. Today, we will be focusing on one of these monsters. According to legend, in the waters of Australia, there dwells a man-eating monster. Its howl has been heard by locals and carried through the night air. The sound makes people terrified to go near the water. And it's said that at night, this creature often prowls the land looking for its next victim. The victims of this creature are often women and children. According to the Australian author Rosa Praed, everyone who has lived in Australia has heard of this creature. Rosa explained the varying description of this creature, saying, quote, "Sometimes as a gigantic snake, sometimes as a species of rhinoceros, with a smooth, pulpy skin and a head like that of a calf. Sometimes as a huge pig, its body yellow, crossed with black stripes. But it is also said to be something more than an animal, and among its supernatural attributes is the cold, awesome, uncanny feeling which creeps over a company at night." End quote. So is this famous tale of this Australian creature just a legend? Is it a cautionary tale? Or could it be real? This is the story of the Bunyip. Hello, welcome to the show. I tell tales every single week that have perplexed me, so if you love a good mystery that leaves you wanting more, don't worry, you are in the right place. And if you end up enjoying today's episode, help a girl out. I would love it so much if you followed along. Leave a 5-star review wherever you listen and subscribe if you're on YouTube. It really, really helps the show, puts it in front of other listeners, so thank you for that. I wanted to remind everyone, because if you are listening to this episode at the time that it comes out, this weekend, Saturday, July 13th, 8 p.m. Central on YouTube Live, I am having my first ever virtual live show. You guys don't want to miss it. It's going to be so fun. I'm so freaking excited. We're going to do Q&As. We're going to do merch giveaways, listener stories. I picked out some discussion questions that I'm going to be doing with you guys, and we're just going to be like chatting. So it won't be like the normal format of an episode, but it'll be a good way for us to connect with each other because, you know, I don't get to connect with you guys. So it'll mean a lot to me, and also it's just going to be tons of fun. So definitely don't want to miss that. And I'm also saying this now because it's this weekend. So any procrastinators who wanted their questions included in the Q&A, who have listener stories that want to be included, please email those to perplexitymysterypodcast@gmail.com. Your listener stories can be about anything mysterious. It doesn't have to be about something that happened to you. If it's about a family member or a friend and they're okay with you sharing, that's fine too. It can be true crime related, paranormal, cryptid, UFO, some weird history or weird event that you were involved in, natural disaster, survivor story. Like, I want to hear all of that. Anything psychological that you've experienced. You know, you guys, if you listen to this podcast, you know, I want all of it. So please send those stories in, and you can ask me any questions. It can be podcast related. It can be personal, things that I like or do in my free time. Just any way that you want to get to know me, anything you're curious about, I'm happy to answer those. Trigger warning for today's episode. This podcast is adult, not for children. Listener discretion is advised. And as always, all of the sources that were used for today's episode will be down in the show notes. So the legend of the Bunyip stems from southeastern Australia. And I wanted to shout out Australia. The reason I picked this episode is because I have a lot of listeners in Australia. Right after the US, Australia is right below them. And it's been that way for, I think, like the last several weeks, if not longer. So Australia listeners, this is for you. And if I mess this up, I am so sorry. I hope you enjoy it. But yeah, it's from southeastern Australia, and it stems from Aboriginal mythology. The creature has been called many names, so I apologize if I say these wrong. Some of the other names that are associated with the bunyip are Kian Prey, the Guru Nati, and the Miri Ula. The monster is known to live in swamps, lagoons, other bodies of water throughout Australia. It's considered to be amphibious, and it's generally described as a miserable, smelly creature with a round head, long neck, large sharp tusks, and a body about the size of a small cow, kind of like an ox or a hippo. Some people have also compared it to a manatee or a seal. But some accounts have also, interestingly enough, given it more of a human type of figure. The creature has been known to have flippers that can change to legs so that it can walk at night. So seems like kind of a shapeshifter. Some reports have also said the creature has shaggy fur like a mammal, but other people have said they've seen scales or feathers. It's also interesting because I feel like all of the other cryptids that I've researched in the past have a pretty succinct description. These were so varying, so different. Some people even said the bunyip looked like an enormous starfish. So incredibly different descriptions. I feel like I see it now as more of like a concept. It also has been reported that the reason these physical descriptions of the bunyip vary so much is because people are too busy running away from it to really be able to take in all of the details. I also wondered, though, if it could be one of those creatures that can take on various forms, or if it's something paranormal where, like, you see what you want to see and maybe it's based on your own experiences. The bunyip has been reported to make a booming or a roaring noise, and it's even been known to devour humans. And they seem to have a liking for women and children. They've also been known to lay eggs in platypus nests, which I thought was really random, but it is amphibious, so I don't know why they're laying eggs in a platypus nest, though. The bunyip is also believed to have supernatural powers, which would make it a cryptid. It's capable to change water levels, like it could cause a drought or a flood. It can bring its victims to their knees because of its powerful, ear-shattering roar. And the bunyip can even hypnotize humans with mind control. The bunyip appears in Nurungeri folklore in southeastern Australia. And it is a water spirit called the Mulyawonk in this Nurungeri folklore. The legend of the Mulyawonk says that the creature was created from greed. It's supposed to harm anybody that takes more than their fair share of fish in their waters. The Mulyawonk can also take children if they get too close to the water, which kind of reminded me of a lot of those cautionary tales and other folklore like La Llorona in Mexican folklore, for example. One legend also says that the bunyip broke the rainbow serpent's greatest law by eating his totem animal. So for those of you who aren't aware, because I wasn't, the rainbow serpent is a common deity. It's often seen as God the Creator in Australian Aboriginal culture. After the bunyip stole the rainbow serpent's totem animal, he ended up being banished by a good spirit named Baime, and then bunyip transformed into this evil entity. And now the bunyip's job was to basically be evil. It would lure tribesmen and their livestock into the water, and it would eat them. Today, Aboriginal Australians use the term bunyip as a more general way to refer to evil spirits. So this could be wrong, but it also made me wonder if that's why a lot of the descriptions vary as well, because it seems like at least now bunyip is more of an umbrella term. Mark Coolmatry, who's part of Ramandjeri and Warki clans within the Nurungeri, has explained the importance of this legend, saying, quote, "The Mulyawonk story has been told to us forever, teaching us to preserve the environment so that the Mulyawonk stays healthy," end quote. So it could also be this concept of taking care of the land. Many Aboriginal stories of the Bunyip seem to center around this interconnectedness of all things, the reliance of people on the natural world. So now let's get into where the word Bunyip seems to have come from. Where did it come from? When did we first start seeing it in literature? So the origin of the word Bunyip seems to have been traced back to the Wimba language of Aboriginal people of Victoria, Australia. And this is from the word Banib. I think that's how you say it, but it could be Banib. The word Bunyip usually translates to devil or evil spirit. And the word Bon Yip, spelled slightly different, first appeared in the Sydney Gazette in 1812. It was used by a man named James Ives to describe, quote, a large black animal like a seal with a terrible voice that was horrifying the locals in this area, end quote. Like many legends, there are many variations. In his 2001 book, writer Robert Holden identified at least 9 regional variations of the Bunyip across Australia. Scholars have suggested that the Bunyip lore has been reinforced by imported European folklore, kind of like the lore of the Irish puka. And over time, as European settlers started to gentrify this legend, it became less frightening and the meaning of the word Bunyip changed. In the 1800s, people started using Bunyip as an insult. They would say that if you're a Bunyip, that means you're an imposter, kind of like how the word humbug used to be used. The word today can be used in Australia to indicate someone who is particularly stupid. The Bunyip began to be described as a plant eater also when Europeans started gentrifying this legend and making it more friendly, like trying to make the creature seem more benevolent. And it was even written and illustrated in books during this time as being this friendly creature. Christine Judith Nichols of the Australian National University, who is an expert on Aboriginal literature and art, has written that the Bunyip's transition from being a beast to more of a friend is an act of colonization. Nichols has also said that stripping these monsters of their original value and meaning can transform them into commodities. So because of this, you can even see an animatronic Bunyip along the Murray River. There were a large number of Bunyip sightings, especially between 1840 and the 1850s, and others stem back arguably to the 17th century, usually in the southeastern colonies of Victoria, New South Wales, and South Australia. So let's get into some sightings. In 1637, French missionary Jacques Marquette would say, quote, while skirting some rocks, which by their height and length inspire awe, we saw upon one of them 2 painted monsters, which at first made us afraid, and upon which the boldest savages dare not long rest their eyes. They are as large as a calf, they have horns on their head like those of a deer, a horrible look, red eyes, a beard like a tiger's, and a face somewhat like a man's, a body covered with scales, and so long a tail that it winds all around the body, passing above the head and going back between the legs, ending in a fish's tail. End quote. One of the earliest accounts of the Bunyip occurred in 1818 when explorers James Meehan and Hamilton Hume discovered large bones in Lake Bathurst in New South Wales. They didn't call the creature a Bunyip, though, but they would describe it as being remains that were similar to a manatee or a hippo. There was also an account from an English convict who escaped a penal colony near present-day Melbourne. So this convict claimed that they had seen a Bunyip back in their early 1800s when they were living amongst the Aboriginal people in the area. This man was named William Buckley. According to William Buckley's account, the Bunyip was an extraordinary amphibious animal. It had gray feathers that covered its whole back. It had also killed and devoured a woman from the community. In the mid-1830s, George Rankin found fossilized bones, and later, Thomas Mitchell in the Wellington Caves of South Wales also found fossilized bones. British anatomist Sir Richard Owen identified the fossils as being marsupials Diprotodon and Nodotherium. And Diprotodon is an extinct animal. When I looked at pictures of it, it kind of reminded me of a bear or like a wombat type of creature. And Nodotherium is an extinct marsupial animal from this area. 1845 would be the first time that the word bunyip was ever used in literature. In July of 1845, the Geelong Advertiser announced the discovery of fossils that were found near Geelong under the headline, "Wonderful Discovery of a New Animal." This was a continuation of the story of the fossil remains that the other people had found. And the newspaper would say, quote, "On the bone being shown to an intelligent black, he at once recognized it as belonging to the bunyip, which he declared he had seen. On being requested to make a drawing of it, he did so without hesitation." End quote. The account noted a story of an Aboriginal woman that had been killed by a bunyip, and they said that the most damning evidence out of all of this came from a man named Mumbo Ron. And Mumbo Ron would say there were several deep wounds on his breast that made claw-like markings. So that was kind of like the first proof that at the very least they had been attacked by something. Mumbo Ron would also give his account describing the creature, saying, "The bunyip then is represented as uniting the characteristics of a bird and of an alligator. It has a head resembling an emu, with a long bill, at the extremity of which is a transverse projection on each side, with serrated edges like the bone of the stingray. Its body and legs partake of the nature of the alligator. The hind legs are remarkably thick and strong, and the forelegs are much stronger, but still of great strength. The extremities are furnished with long claws, but the blacks say its usual method of killing its prey is by hugging it to death. When in the water, it swims like a frog, and when on shore, it walks on its hind legs with its head erect, in which position it measures 12 or 13 feet in height." This account, because it's so detailed, was later put in a lot of Australian newspapers, and this appears to be the first use of the word bunyip in a written publication. There was also a really strange skull that was found in January 1846. It was found by a settler from the banks of Murrumbidgee River near Barronald, New South Wales. Initial reports said that the skull was something unknown to science. They were like, "We've never seen anything like this before." And the person who found the skull would say that all of the natives that also saw the skull for themselves would call it a bunyip. But a year and a half later, July 1847, after several experts would end up examining the skull, they would find it was actually the fetal skull of a calf. So this was determined by a number of experts, including W.S. McLeay and Professor Owen. Despite this discovery, the skull was still put on display in the Australian Museum, Sydney, for 2 days, and it was advertised as a bunyip skull. So I'm not sure if this was like a money grab, like if they already knew the truth or not, but visitors would flock in to see this skull, and the Sydney Morning Herald would report that a lot of people, after they would go see the skull, started coming out and saying that they had had a bunyip sighting. They were like, "Oh, I saw something too, I saw something too." They would also say that almost everyone seemed to become immediately aware that they had been hearing strange sounds in the lagoons, like around the areas where they lived, usually at nighttime. Some people said they had been seeing some type of large black creature in the water. And then sometime around this time in March, I think it might have been in 1848, there was a large creature that was described as either a bunyip or a giant platypus. The creature was said to have been sunning himself in a peaceful area of the Yarra, just opposite of the Custom House in Melbourne. And I do have a quote here. They said, "Immediately a crowd gathered and 3 men set off in a boat to try to capture it. But then when they got close, the creature disappeared. End quote. That same year, the Sydney Morning Herald would also report an eyewitness encounter between a herdsman and a bunyip. The man said that the creature was not something he had ever seen before. It was as big as a calf. It had really large ears that would perk up, and it had a very thick mane of hair from the head down to the neck, as well as 2 large tusks. And this frightened the man so much that he turns to run away, and the creature was scared as well, and it also ran off. And so when the man saw the creature running away, he kind of glanced back and noticed it had this kind of awkward gallop that it would do. Another early written account of the bunyip came from William Buckley, and we talked earlier about a account that had come from William Buckley, the escaped convict. He would end up writing out his account in his 1952 biography. So in his book, Buckley would say that in his 30 years that he had lived with the Rotherong people, he had become familiar with this legend. In Lake Mudawari, as well as in most of others inland, is a very extraordinary amphibious animal which the natives call bunyip. I could never see any part except the back, which appeared to be covered with feathers of a dusky gray color. It seemed to be about the size of a full-grown calf. I could never learn from any of the natives that they had seen either the head or tail." End quote. Buckley would also claim that he encountered this creature several times, that he felt it had supernatural powers, and he even retold a story that he heard of the Aboriginal woman that had been killed by the bunyip. In an article titled "The Bunyip," a newspaper would report these drawings that were made by a man named Edwin Stockwiller. And Stockwiller had been traveling along the Murray and Goulburn rivers when he had several strange encounters. He came across at least 6 bunyips at various times. People who examined Stockwiller's drawings noticed that they looked a lot like the bunyip. So based on Stockwiller's artwork, the creature had the body of a large seal, 2 small fins attached to both shoulders, a long swan-like neck, a head like a dog, and baggy skin hanging under the jaw, like the pouch of a pelican. The animal also had glossy black skin covered with hair like a platypus. During one of his encounters, Stockwiller's boat was about 30 feet away from a bunyip, and so he took his gun and he fired at it, but it got away. The smallest bunyip that Stockwiller ever saw, because they did vary in size, according to Stockwiller, seemed to be about 5 feet long, and the largest he ever saw was over 15 feet long. So after he made these sketches of the animal, Mr. Stockwiller showed his drawings to people in the Goulburn tribe, who declared that the picture was like Bunyip's brother. So they saw these close similarities to the bunyip, and after speaking with the Goulburn tribe, he continued to have these encounters with this creature. But he decided to try to not kill it because what the natives told him was this was a creature you don't want to mess with. It's dangerous. Don't try to kill it. It'll mess you up. So he decided to leave it alone, and eventually his drawings start popping up in all these Australian newspapers. The descriptions of the bunyip would continue to vary across these different newspaper accounts, leading Stockwiller to later dispute the newspaper descriptions in a letter, saying that he never called the animal a bunyip. It did not have a neck like a swan, and he never said anything about the size of the animal, as he never saw the whole body. So this is where it gets a little bit confusing, because we're going off of these descriptions that are from the newspaper that are said to be from Stockwiller, but it seems like some things got twisted in the media. So who knows? But the general consensus seems to be like it kind of looks like a mix between a seal, a platypus, and a cow. Stockwiller later made a diorama of the bunyip, and it took him about 4 years to paint it. It was reputed to be a mile long and made of 70 individual pictures. The diorama, though, has long since disappeared, so it we're not sure where it is. But it seems like Stockwell never said it was a bunyip. He just said, like, a lot of people in my groups that I've been interacting with and these tribes in the area said that's what it is. He did seem to agree, though, that it had a lot of similarities to it. So before we wrap up this episode, let's get into theories about what this creature could be and what's causing people to see it. One of the biggest theories is that people who see the bunyip, it's just a misidentification. They're seeing what they think is a bunyip, but it's some other type of animal, maybe one that they haven't encountered before, or a trick of the light. So a lot of people say that it could be an elephant seal. That's one of the most common theories. They do have a similar physical appearance. I know that descriptions of the bunyip vary wildly, but generally speaking, there are similarities there, like the head shape, the skin, the size of the creature, that kind of thing. And this is most commonly accepted. So people who are familiar with the bunyip, a lot of them will say, yeah, it's just because of seal sightings. And the theory was provided initially in 1933 by an Australian geologist named Charles Finner. Finner noticed the long neck, round head, and body of a manatee description, and so to him it was a pretty simple conclusion that this was some type of elephant seal or leopard seal. He ended up writing about all of this in a world-renowned book called Bunyips and Billabongs, and according to him, the cryptid was likely based on the southern elephant seals and the leopard seals that frequented the area, particularly in the Murray and Darling rivers. Other people have said it could be a leopard, or it could be some type of marsupial lion, like the thylacoleo. Now, this animal is long since extinct, but we'll talk about that. So the Wild Times podcast was one of the sources I came across. They presented an interesting theory. Aboriginal people have been in mainland Australia for at least 65,000 years. So perhaps way back then, they encountered a thylacoleo and told their families about it for generations. And this creature was driven to extinction 40 to 50,000 years ago. But perhaps that's what they saw, and then they just kept telling. It passed on for generations. And so that's why they have this description. It's similar to a thylacoleo. They just didn't have a name for it back then. And maybe the people who see the bunyip now, it's because of those spiritual ties, or they're like tying what they've heard from that legend to what they're seeing in front of them. Kind of like that you see what you want to see, or you see what you know kind of theory. This is one of the ones I have the hardest time believing, but there is a theory that it could be some type of bird. In 2017, Carl Brandt wrote an article in Australian BirdLife suggesting the bunyip could have come from Aboriginal encounters with the southern cassowary. According to the first written description of the bunyip in 1845, the bunyip did lay eggs, particularly really large, pale blue eggs. Some people have also said it has feathers. People have said it has sharp claws, strong back legs. There have been some accounts saying it has a brightly colored chest and an emu-like head. And if you look at pictures of an Australian cassowary, this would definitely match this particular description that I just read. There's also a bird called the Australasian bittern, and the males make a low-pitched booming noise during breeding season. They also live near water. They live in marshy areas. So that has led them to think that this is like the noise that people hear at night. This booming noise is actually coming from a bird. And it's also caused a lot of people to call the Australasian bittern the bunyip bird. But I feel like the vast majority of the sightings and the descriptions I came across seem more marsupial than bird. A few experts have also suggested that the bunyip legend could have stemmed from Aboriginal sightings of the Diprotodon, which is a giant wombat, that bear-sized Australian marsupial. The Diprotodon went extinct more than 30,000 years ago. The Diprotodon spent a lot of its time in water, or at least that's what scientists think, And the ancestors of Aboriginal people arrived in Australia more than 50,000 years ago. So it's likely that they interacted with and hunted the Diprotodon. So those are like the animal theories, but there are also some paranormal theories. This could be a cultural memory or some type of residual haunting. Maybe the bunyip is a cultural memory of an extinct Australian marsupial. And when confronted with the remains of some of the now extinct Australian marsupials, Aboriginal persons would often identify them as the bunyip. To this day, there are also people who believe the legendary bunyip could be 100% real. Undiscovered species lurking in the wetlands. There's lots of crazy species to see in Australia. Wildlife experts generally, though, aren't sold. They say it's nothing more than a mythological creature, an urban legend. There's no verified corpses or remains that have ever come to light of the bunyip. According to Sarah Dern from Atlas Obscura, quote, "The bunyip reminds us of the dangers lurking in the outback, with more than 100 poisonous snakes and wild dingoes looking for their next meal. The remote reaches of the continent are still a place of monsters, and even the most skeptical among us may become believers in the dark. So if you hear the blood-chilling cry of the bunyip echoing across the billabongs and remote wetlands, start running." End quote. So that, everybody, is the story of the bunyip of Australia. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I hope I didn't butcher this precious legend too much. I did enjoy learning about it, and I enjoyed telling it. If you did enjoy today's episode, I would love it so much if you continue to follow along to this small independent podcast. Leave a 5-star review wherever you listen. That is the best way to help the show because it boosts it up the algorithms. I don't know why that's how it works, but that is how it works. And before I was a content creator, full disclosure, I would listen to podcasts for years. I would love them, but I wouldn't leave reviews because I didn't really think about why that was important. I didn't understand it. Also, I feel like sometimes we think about a particular person that leaves a review, like, oh, you're that kind of person, you went and left a review. Leaving a review is just a way to support the people that you love and the free content that you're consuming week after week. So please go do that. If you haven't, on Apple, you can also write reviews, and that means the world to me. I do read all of them. And if you're on YouTube, I would love if you hit the subscribe button. If you really want to support the show, go check out the Patreon. You get exclusive bonus content on there. I just finished my 4-part series on there, Shiny Happy People. It's all about the Duggar family and Bill Gothard, the IBLP, which is like a cult-like church, and it got really, really crazy. I think it's this week, some creepy stories from the internet coming out, but they're all cryptid based. So this week is all about cryptids. And so if you liked this episode, you'll probably really like that. I told like 6 different cryptid encounters from the internet. They're all different in different areas. So that was lots of fun. And I'm always putting new stuff on there. So definitely go check that out. And that is one of the awesome ways to support as well. Let me know what you thought of this episode. You can comment on Spotify on this exact episode. You can comment down below on YouTube. There are other support links down in the episode description as well. My Buy Me a Coffee link is there. My merch links are down there, and I have some exciting things coming again on the merch line. I know I just released some hats, but there is more stuff coming, and I will be talking about that more on the live show. Which brings me to my final reminder, this Saturday, July 13th, 8 p.m. Central. Be sure that you are on that virtual live show. It'll be on YouTube Live, so just go to YouTube, make sure you're subscribed to Perplexity Mystery Podcast. Hop on there at 8 p.m. Central. Bring a blanket, get some snacks, get cozy, sit with your dog, bring your family, your friends, whoever, and it's going to be a great time. And don't forget, if you want your questions answered, if you have listener stories that you want read, you need to send those to me ASAP, perplexitymysterypodcast@gmail.com. And I think that wraps everything up for today. You all are amazing. Hope you have a great week and stay safe. And I will talk to you next week. Bye!